Talk about fraud-free. What do you mean by that?
Fraud-free meaning a vinyl billboard on a main street in a town. So it's unskippable. It's not subject to ad blockers. It's not subject to cable cutters, folks who will pay subscription services and not want to see any ads. And I think the last thing, the experience that a consumer has with the ad itself, it's not intrusive, right? When you're watching a TV ad, it's breaking up the content that like you actually want to consume, right? You're watching this movie and all of a sudden here's the ad that like is interruptive. Out of home kind of has this passive experience where it's on your commute, depending on where you're stuck in traffic, right? It's really hard to overserve to an intended audience when the format itself exists in such a public domain.
Got it. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another epic episode of Marketing Trends. This is your host, Jeremy Bergeron. As always, I'm thrilled to be here. I'm super excited because we have another executive from another brand. We've had a few leaders from this company come on our show. I was excited to see this human being come on. Jeremy Flynn is the Senior Vice President of Data, Products, and Strategy at Clear Channel Outdoors. Now, Jeremy is a trailblazer when it comes to product partnerships, media revenue strategy, operations. I mean, he's serving a really important role there. And he has a pretty remarkable track record of driving innovation through offline media. So epic human being. We chatted for a while before we press record, and I am excited to nerd out with you, Jeremy. Thank you for being on the show.
Excited to be here, Jeremy. Also excited to do it with another Jeremy. It's amazing.
Seriously, you are the first Jeremy in 2024. We had a Jeremy in 2023. You're the first one in 24, and I'm glad you're here, man. We had your CMO on, it was last year, I guess, Dan Levy on, an amazing human being, dude. And when I saw your name come through, I'm like, yes, another Clear Channel gangster that's going to come chat with us. So tell us, just give us a quick level set of what your role is there. It's a big organization, but tell us what your role specifically is. What are you nerding out on as the SVP of Data Products and Strategy at Clear Channel?
Sure. First of all, really appreciate being able to be on the show and talk a little bit about what I do. At Clear Channel, my main goal is to help brands and advertisers understand the audience that they could hit with out-of-home campaign and measure the outcomes that they're looking to drive with the consumers that they're trying to reach. And so I've been doing that for the last 8 years. I oversee an analytics platform called Radar. And within Radar, there's solutions that help make out-of-home more addressable and measurable. And for a 100-year-old company, it's fresh every single day. There's a new challenge coming up in the marketing ecosystem, it seems, every few months or so. And so staying at the forefront of merging changes and technologies and innovations, that's kind of what gets me up and excited every day to get into the office.
Okay. So clue us in on what are the unique advantages when it comes to out of home in terms of audience targeting compared to digital and TV? How does Clear Channel capitalize on those kind of strengths?
So first off, it's in the public square. And so it's the only advertising medium where people can observe other people interacting with an advertisement. When you are watching a TV ad, you are in your home by yourself. If you're on your device, it's you experiencing that ad individually. The power of out of home is kind of that community or communal experience that can be generated off of it. And there are other things about it, right? It's unskippable. It's bold, it's fraud-free, which is especially an increasing challenge in the advertising ecosystem today.
Talk about fraud-free. What do you mean by that?
Fraud-free meaning a vinyl billboard on a main street in a town. It's really hard to overserve or not deliver an ad to an intended audience when the format itself exists in such a public domain.
Got it.
So it's unskippable. It's not subject to ad blockers, right? It's not subject to cable cutters, folks who will pay subscription services and not want to see any ads. And I think the last thing, at least in my opinion, is the experience that a consumer has with the ad itself. It's not intrusive, right? When you're watching a TV ad, it's breaking up the content that like you actually want to consume, right? You're watching this movie and all of a sudden here's the ad that like is interruptive just as like a heavy scene is getting underway. Out of home kind of has this passive experience where it's like on your commute over the course of a month, and like you see it at different vantage points over a given week, depending on where you're stuck in traffic, right? And so like the ad experience is I think just very different, and I think makes for like other successes when you get into measurement of its ad effectiveness.
Awesome. So you touched a little bit earlier, Jeremy, on this idea of like basically attribution, like data attribution when it comes to out of home. Can you talk on like how what's closing the loop on that a little bit? What are you seeing and how are brands actually attributing out of home?
Yeah. So I guess just from a couple different perspectives, right? The perception of out of home is that it is not measurable. And I will say that it is. And so how do you kind of develop solutions or products that actually demonstrate to a brand or advertiser that here is how you can measure out of home's effectiveness? And there's a bit of a history of that, which is out of home is primarily bought as like a top of funnel medium, so driving brand awareness, brand consideration, purchase intent. Right. But with the advent of mobile data, we could actually look at consumer behaviors after they have been exposed to out-of-home advertising. And that has really kind of opened up the middle to lower funnel in terms of measurement, right? So now we could track who is seeing an out-of-home ad and what website they are engaging with, who's seeing an out-of-home ad. And the first thing that we did was actually visiting a retail store location. We were actually the first out-of-home company to measure out-of-home to visitation influence attribution. And now we're in this really awesome space of connecting directly with different analytics companies to measure CPG household sales measurement. Or if you're a mobile app and you have an MMP, how are we looking at new installs or basket sizes and truly showing closed loop attribution in terms of driving out of home exposure to tuning into specific content. And so we are really measuring media impact. And what that has done is it has allowed us to kind of be compared apples to apples now to other media channels. And the other thing that it's done is we've measured it now for years, meaning we have like a basket of programs now that we could start to look at in terms of benchmarks. I like to say that we're in the hundreds and Google and Facebook are in the thousands or if not millions of measurement programs. But what we're seeing is this trend, which I think is really cool, which is out of home is the only media channel that is not adversely affected by frequency. In fact, like the more someone is exposed to an out-of-home campaign, the more they exhibit the intended behavior that you're looking to drive. So as an example, if you're looking to get someone to visit your store location, the more they're exposed to a billboard, the more they will visit a store. If you're looking for them to order within a food delivery app, the more they will order and repeat order. So it has this incredible effect in terms of driving loyalty and repeat behavior. And if you observe kind of the challenges of the other advertising channels, the first thing that CTV had to come out with, if you're YouTube, is frequency capping and putting a limit on the number of ads that a consumer saw when kind of experiencing it. Like and unfortunately, but fortunately, you cannot frequency cap static out-of-home campaign. You can do it with some of the digital, but you can't in a lot of our campaigns. And the thing that is kind of a challenge for most other media is actually a strength of ours. And so getting back to your original question, just setting the measurement up is kind of helping us understand like the unique benefits that out-of-home actually offers. I'd say the last thing is just what the expectations need to be, which are other media consistently on a daily or weekly or monthly basis provide insight into how impactful their media is in terms of driving an outcome for a brand. And out of home, at least in the last few years, has only been post-campaign attribution measurement. We're also trying to speed up the speed to insight. And so today we're providing those weekly insights to some of our customers and helping them understand how they're driving outcomes during an out-of-home campaign. And that I think is another moment in our own industry development and how we kind of participate in the omni channel. And so measurement is definitely a passion point if you can't pick that up.
Yes, I love it.
We're doing some cool stuff there.
That's amazing. What about advances in like geolocation tech, right? That just allow advertisers to target specific demographics and locations even more accurately now. What are you seeing there?
So much. And I think that's kind of what's kept it fresh. Like when I started, it was about reported location data, right? So like you filled out a report and you said, hey, I was at this Starbucks. And then there was an ability to like productize bidstream location data, right? So location data that was served in a mobile ad, but past a location. And that's not really like the best kind of data to prove to someone, hey, you're driving around and you're looking up, right? Because it's dependent on seeing a mobile ad. So then there was this advent of SDK movement data where you could actually look at background persistent GPS location. And that's kind of still the holy grail of us looking at mobile location data in terms of who's exposed to an advertisement and the behavior that they exhibit afterwards. And then there's this increasing headwind of consumer privacy regulation on the state level. And what does that data mean? And then you have companies like Apple pushing out changes like ATT that restrict the number of apps that even capture that location data. And respect for the consumer also really, really matters. And so as we kind of have entered into the 6th or 7th phase of using location data to like drive targeting, you've had to really be nimble and adjust for that overall climate and kind of build like a consumer first, privacy centric data platform that uses privacy compliant location data to actually run the solutions you want to offer to brands and advertisers. And what does that mean? What does that all mean simply? Like instead of being like weirdly technical, it means that brands and advertisers are able to meet their consumers in the locations and in the context that matters to them, right? Like it helps us uncover the best places for brands to advertise to meet consumers in the moments that matter, and in their consumer journey or the journey that they're taking when they're picking their kids up from school, right? So that's really what the data has kind of enabled for brands and advertisers.
Do you think we're moving towards just a pure digital dynamic, billboard, like no more static billboards? Like what do you see happening like globally in just the realm of billboards?
Well, it depends on if I've watched Blade Runner or Minority Report and there's like that hyper individualized billboard. But yeah, obviously there's been a lot of conversion to digital screens over the years. And like vinyl billboards like are also really beautiful in the sense that they like have a history to them. And so like I don't think that everything will become completely digital like on the front end. I do think more things will become digital on the back end, right? There's the data solutions that we build, we like to say are available not only for the digital out of home that we execute on, but also the static out of home as well. And the airports media, but also the programmatic media that we sell. And so like we try to like think of out of home irregardless of format. We like to think about it as the strength. And I guess the last point I'll make is it's not the inventory type itself. What matters is the composition of the audience that is in front of that board, regardless of what type of screen it is. Like what matters most is making sure that cohort engages with the ad that is being seen. And that can mean successful targeting or successful creative, right? And so like I care more about the audience, the out of home audience, not necessarily like the type of format that they're exposed to.
Fascinating. I mean, you've been there almost 10 years, right? You've been at Clear Channel is it almost 10 years?
Yeah, it's it'll be I think it's 8 or 9. Yeah,
okay, coming up on the decade, man.
It's coming up.
I mean, because you think about you think about being in a space in an industry in and around like, because your perspective around like the data and around like the story that the data has been telling over the past almost decade, just for you being someone who's making sense of it all for brands, it's got, I mean, there's I don't even know, like there's got to be so many beautiful stories you're able to tell based on where we're at as a world, how we interact with this channel and this medium, and the overall effectiveness of it. It's got to be just profound now. And so I imagine many brands are just continuing to trust this continued less intrusive form of advertising, right? Compared to other digital ads. It's definitely still at the table in a big way, it sounds like.
Yeah, no, I think there's been, at least within the last year, these paradigm shifts. Like if you talk about preparing for cookie deprecation, what you have are basically folks who have had to rely on online display advertising, which was me. I was, before coming to Clear Channel 10 years ago, I was in digital media, and they've had to like start to look at different marketing techniques to continue to perform the jobs that they have within their marketing organization, and that's led people to work mostly with different kinds of data beyond cookies, first-party CRM data, mobile location data. And I think that disruption has actually helped in seeing opportunity in using out-of-home differently within marketing campaigns, either as a tentpole strategy or as like a way of kind of incrementing your audience reach. And so that's been really fun to see, kind of coming from the extreme performance end of it on the digital side into, hey, there needs to be a better audience and measurement apparatus in out of home, to now we have it, and here's how we're executing on it, and now we're pulling in brands and advertisers into incorporating out of home into their strategy each and every day.
Are you seeing more industries or segments really grab onto this? Like they're getting what you're saying, they're understanding like, hey, we figured this out. Like this is actually a really powerful, like, are you seeing, as you look across industries, some are pro out of home, they've been there a long time and it's part of their mix. Are you finding other industries catching up? Are you finding industries passing some of the old ones up? Like what are you seeing just from across the sea?
It's a great question. There are really big brands that have always come to out of home, like to tell their story or punch above their weight. Like historically, Apple has been an incredible out of home advertiser when they were out of money in the 80s, and they decided, hey, we have to still run this Think Different campaign. Let's put a billboard up on the 101, right? And they did that. And McDonald's and Snapchat, like huge percentages of their overall marketing spend have been historically in and out of home. And so if some of the Fortune 100 brands recognize that their media investment should be between 10 and 20% in out of home, you then start to look at, well, what are some of the under leveraged segments? And who's like starting to move in that direction. So I'm happy to say that, like, because measurement has improved, we're able to pull in verticals like CPG, because we're able to measure things like incremental new purchasers of consumer packaged good brands at the household level, right? And so we're able to make a convincing argument to say, hey, like, here's the impact that an out of home campaign can drive for your brand. And that holds true for legacy CPG brands as much as if you want to do a product launch for your brand and you don't have a consumer base yet, it's a really good way of like reaching a mass audience, right? So we've seen that be the case within CPG. We've seen pharmaceutical advertising increase. We've also started to see like app-based traditionally performance marketing companies recognize the need to pull back on performance marketing expectations that maybe is set by their board level, and know that hey, we've reached a point of diminished returns on acquiring customers. How do we increase like our lead gen, or how do we increase like the kinds of customers that could be adopters of our product? And so like highly technical, innovative brands are turning to out of home to like actually drive that long-term brand effectiveness that they need to survive.
Are you seeing more of the startup kind of world? I mean, because tech giants, and a lot of them frequently use out of home, right? You got Apple and Coca-Cola, right? These brands we all know and love, and startups oftentimes I feel like could miss it. Like they could be using out of home to build brand, like you said, build brand awareness, especially in tech hubs, in areas that are frequented by their demographic. But are you finding the startup world like wake up to out of home more? Or are you still seeing a lot of people missing it?
No, they're there, and I'm also based in San Francisco, so like
You're
I'm
all around
especially
it.
biased to seeing it. they know that they need to be here to communicate to a venture capital audience. Like most venture capital is still determined out here in the Bay Area. And so a startup definitely recognizes that a way to punch above their weight is to actually advertise in this market. And they have to grow the number of customers that they have. And so successful startups have deployed a strategy to go into satellite markets beyond San Francisco. So they might like do a launch of a new capability, or there's like a conference for Snowflake or Databricks, and they want to communicate to that audience that is coming into San Francisco, or Dreamforce. And then they decide, okay, now I need to go grow customers in the middle of the country. So like, let me run a campaign with you in Texas, or let me run a campaign with you in Minneapolis. And so part of that growth strategy, though, is rooted again in being able to measure effectiveness, right? So how do we look at new customers that are acquired for like a startup in some of those expansion markets that they might be interested in? And so we play a really big role with our teams internally in thinking through that market design, or that like growth of a crawl, walk, run of like starting in one place and going to another market. And that's not just for tech brands, that's for quick service restaurants opening up in new markets across the country. That's for regional CPG products that now want to go national, right? So like it's a strategy that we employ a lot.
I know you probably have a folder full of, amazing creative campaigns that you've seen, over the years. Yeah. But I would just love to hear you touch on, some that have been really innovative to you, some of the things you're seeing. Maybe you can mention them brands, maybe you can just mention the industries that they serve, but we'd just love to hear some of the really creative things you're seeing out in the space of out of home, and who's doing it really well, if you can say. If not, just maybe some of the mechanics of what's making these campaigns kick ass.
Sure. So you mentioned verticals that get it. One that I was particularly interested in were kind of the DTC brands, the direct to consumer, because they don't have physical retail locations. And so the successful DTCs almost leveraged out of home as their own store, right? So ones that I've seen be really successful is in commerce districts in cities, where like like if you go to like a different city, they have the same stores. They have like their like the high fashion store, right? And it's like typically the same brand again and again. DTCs were employing out of home advertising on those streets when they did not have a store, and then 8 months later they had a store. And so like it was almost like a way of testing, should I invest like in retail? First by leveraging out of home. So that was like a particularly successful one.
Is that like the kind of the Warby Parker, Casper, like was that that kind of model? I know Warby Parker definitely used out of home to highlight their eyewear.
Yeah.
HelloFresh, some of these brands that really doubled down on out of home before they went retail.
Yes. And when they did go retail, we had this really nice follow-up of saying, hey, now we could also measure consumers who are visiting your store location and how impactful out of home was in driving that increased foot traffic. In terms of others, like during the pandemic, essential workers, right? So I really loved seeing the restaurants that had to remain open, how their advertising changed. And again, we applied some measurement to say, all right, yes, the number of visits to your store have gone down, but the influence of out of home in making sure that when people needed to go get a meal, they still came to your restaurant, or the delivery worker like came and picked up an order, like we were able to measure that. And that was like a context shift in how like creative messaging was delivered. It was like thanking essential workers, and using out of home to communicate that to like the communities in which they were in. And then there's like the ones that are just fun. Like I will name this because I think it's iconic in San Francisco, but I think Airbnb does like a really good job running advertising. The billboard's like on top of its headquarters in SF, I'm pretty sure. And like they just deploy creative and language just like incredibly well, like where you might just be driving back to the East Bay, where I drive to, and like you just like sit there and you're in traffic and you're annoyed about being in traffic, but you're not, because you're seeing a lot of billboards, and you're smiling at like the new ad that Airbnb has put up. And I think that they're an interesting brand too, because they have historically pulled back on performance marketing and tried to really double down on brand marketing. And I'm especially interested in brands that make that strategic choice, and if they've realized like any gains or successes from those choices. Yeah.
Okay, touch on that. Touch on this, the balance of performance marketing and brand marketing, and talk to a lot of executives who maybe steer one way or the other, or avoid going there on which one we should focus on. Like, what's your perspective and opinion on it?
I think I have a strong opinion, so I'll just say that.
Great, we love them. We love it.
But I do think that most marketing organizations are set up with their growth team and their performance team, and they sit separately to convince the CMO like what budgets they should have allocated to them. And part of what I think we should be doing as media owners is trying to break down that silo a bit. And like I would say that out of home delivers great top of the funnel outcomes and is also a performance channel. And I can measure both of those things. And if I measure the mid to lower funnel outcomes, I have already proven that like I've also delivered the top of funnel outcomes. And so being able to measure the whole stack is the kind of measurement and attribution and audience insights that I typically like to take to both a performance-based audience as well as a growth-based audience when I'm at a brand. And that has been really fun over the years, just because when you're dealing with a performance marketing organization, you get access to testing budgets, right? And so if you have something that can be measured, you're able to test. And then with growth folks, like you get to think about longer term campaigns and what primary strategies and secondary strategies a brand team has, and how do you like advance like really strong audience targeting to help a brand like win on the growth strategies that they have to have over like a year or 2 year period. And so I think the other thing, especially with like coming out of COVID and a lot of the economic uncertainty, what we are seeing as a trend is a lot of capital is drying up for performance marketing. There's a lot of harder questions about how successful performance marketing has been achieved at organizations. And like that has kind of promulgated like a shift into more brand marketing efforts, because when the economy is struggling, the number one thing a brand has to do is increase trust with its consumer. And the way to increase trust with the consumer is actually to run brand marketing. And so that's really where I think out of them kind of comes really nicely into play, because it can do both. And so I don't know, that's kind of been an area of deep interest for me lately.
Yeah, it's key in today's rapidly evolving digital landscape. I see this as well. Businesses, they're recognizing this critical need to balance performance marketing with brand marketing, right? And that balance is not going away. And you talk about a channel like out of home where you can really get the best of both worlds all the way through. And performance marketing focuses on this immediate, like you said, measurable result, conversation, sales, things like that. Brand marketing, it builds the long-term brand equity. It's important, and customer loyalty, it's equally important. So brands that are increasingly shifting their strategies to integrate both and do both really well, like you said, shout out Clear Channel, they're doing it well, so pay attention. But it's going to be key, and I completely agree. I think that this integrated approach that's what's going to make brands be competitive and relevant and resilient for years to come. It's been able to really understand and do both, and not say, oh no, it's all about performance, and if it's not performing, get rid of it, right?
I heard this really cool line at a conference I was at recently, where it talked about you run your performance marketing to drive the most value out of your existing audience and customer base, and you run brand marketing to actually increase or increment your total audience size. And like as a marketer, you have to do both, and you have to balance that tension to be successful.
Amazing. Well, I would love to hear a couple of closing thoughts, Jeremy, from you.
Sure.
What, as you kind of look out into the world, and you are someone, Jeremy, I would really value your opinion on this, because you've been in the game. You've been in the game. Okay. But just high level, what do you see are the biggest challenges and the biggest opportunities for Clear Channel Outdoor in the next 5 years? How are you planning to address them?
Sure. So I think that there's a fragmentation of the data landscape that's happening. That's challenge, but with challenge becomes opportunity. like there's going to be a federated exchange of data. And so how do you set up the strategic partnerships with different companies where you could align and forge like a partnership that like provides value back and forth? Like that used to be just so easy as an online publisher because you placed a tag on your web page and you had the cookie data. You don't have that anymore, right? So how do you like move past that? I think being nimble enough when there's hopefully some form of like centralized data privacy governance, right? Whether that can happen at the federal level or continues to roll out at the state by state level, like you need to be agile in your product development to be ready for that and have the marketing solutions in place. And so with that, I think comes a need to not be too over dependent on individual identifiers. So I talked a lot about mobile location data at the beginning. That's not the only kinds of data that we use to power our measurement or our audience planning or our activation, right? So like, how do you like make sure that you are dealing with permanent data sets? And that obviously bleeds into like the thing that, that everyone is talking about, which is AI, which is like, if there is a macro decline in data or data signal loss, how do you use machine learning or artificial intelligence to kind of create probabilistic models for building out audiences or building out measurement solutions? And so I think between the need to increase partnerships because things are becoming more decentralized, or be nimble with like your infrastructure and use multiple identifiers to achieve your data outcomes, I think that will all like be advanced by just technology improving. Like AI is an amazing development that has been around for a while already and is now kind of entering into the marketing ecosystem in an interesting way.
I love it. Incredible, man.
Yeah.
Let's get into some lightning round questions and wrap it up. You cool?
Okay, sure.
All
okay.
right, let's do it. Okay. Now these are lightning round, Jeremy. So just go answer from the heart, answer from the gut. Okay.
Okay.
All right. First question is, what's one marketing trend that you think is overhyped?
I think channel specific marketing is overhyped. Like I think everyone talks about like what channel to be invested in. And the reason why is no consumer thinks about what channel they saw an ad from. No one's like, oh, I saw that CTV ad. Or they just think, oh, I saw that ad for RX bars. Let me go get one next time I'm at the store. Right. Like, that I think is like an overhyped concept.
Okay, I love it. Okay, I'm especially interested in your answer to this one, and I'll let you go two ways, but one of two ways. Which marketing book should everyone read, or just which book should everyone read?
I really love The 4 Disciplines of Execution. It's a great book. It basically breaks down how you kind of set like your wildly important goals and your cadence of accountability and the measurement to achieve your goals. So I think that's one. I think that marketing is deeply rooted in psychology. And so I'm a big Michael Lewis fan. And so there's a book that he wrote called The Undoing Project, which talks about just human biases in social psychology. And so like if you're thinking about advertising, how do you kind of understand what they are before you design like a really good campaign? And I'll just share the most recent book I read was about productivity. It was called Slow Productivity by Cal Newport, and said even more so to stress the most important things that you need to do and be okay with pulling back on not executing on the superfluous, but focusing on like what's really important.
Amazing. We didn't even touch on the fact that you're a voracious consumer of information, Jeremy. Maybe I did it intentionally so we can do a round. We'll do a round 2 interview. Okay. We'll go deep. We'll go deep. Because something we didn't talk about, everyone, is that this human being reads voraciously, as I said, and also brings a lot of it into his work professionally and with his teams and stuff. So we touched very lightly here, but these 3 I'm definitely going to remember. What's the last ad? Heck, for you, what's the last billboard, the last out-of-home ad that made you go, wow?
I think the Airbnb billboards are really good in San Francisco, and I'm constantly driving past them. And it's not just wow, this is so lame, but I like live in a city and like we have local municipalities using billboard advertising to tell people like how they could access like clean water, right? And like that also matters, and that's super lame, but like there's a mix of like you go on a vacation or you're staying like at home and you have the services that you need to like have clean water and clean air.
There's a bunch of really clever, like one-worded billboards I'm seeing.
They had one where it was like a chicken barn and it said "Cluck yeah."
Cluck yeah, I see that one. Cluck yeah, right here.
Like, let's get real. Like, Airbnb is trying to advertise properties, but like they need to play it to emotions. And so properties that have pools, like they had like one that said like Marco Polo, which is like a great game that you played as like a little kid when you were swimming with friends. And so like it touches
Smart.
on that. Yeah, it's smart. So that I get, those are the ones that like, maybe I'm not going, oh wow, but I'm just like smiling, and like my affinity towards the brand has improved.
If you could use only one marketing tool for the rest of your career, Jeremy Flynn, what would it be?
Every one of my colleagues at Clear Channel will know that my answer will be Jira.
Okay.
And the reason for it is just for ruthless prioritization. So like, obviously you need marketing tools to like set up your brand trackers and look how your campaign's performing. And Jira is the step before, because it helps you think through the things that you are doing and the things that you are not doing. And it creates that binary, and that allows for focus and execution.
What does it feel like to have a leader that's ruthlessly prioritizing, but maybe the rest of the team isn't? Like, how do you operate if like the leader is like really good at being productive and you're not? Like, how does that even translate? Because it's got to trickle down.
Well, I'll be vulnerable for a second, which is like learning how to like back off. And I'm sure my team will agree. But I think the thing that you need to do when you ruthlessly prioritize is understand that that is you setting your vision of what you want executing, and then allowing your team to arrive at that in the way that they want to, or like the path that they want to take, right? And so the priority is more about like kind of setting what the goal is and the outcome, and then the team figuring out like in concert, like how they actually drive towards it, and then tap into you for advice or help. And again, like allowing for that space to exist, I think is like extremely important.
Amazing. Okay. What's one brand you admire for its marketing?
RX.
RX. RX bars?
Yes. So
okay.
They have an amazing story, which is they used branding to like help with their equity event, their exit. Like they were bought, I think, by Kellogg like 10 years ago for like $600 million. And if you look at the original packaging for RX bar, like it said nothing about the value or the benefits that like someone gets from eating it. And now if you look at it, what's the first thing you see? It has egg whites. It has protein, right? And like I am like super impressed by like how they have approached their marketing strategy of simplification and like getting to the value and benefits to a customer who buys their brand.
Okay, last question. We're 1 minute over. I hope we're okay, Jeremy.
We're good. We're good.
So now we're sitting on a stage with an audience full of Fortune 1000 CMOs, and they're listening very attentively to what you and I, but mostly you, are talking about. Now they're listening. This is Jeremy's final word of the night. We have every brand represented, every industry. They're in the room, 1,000 of them, CMOs. They're all here in the room. What do you want to tell them?
I want to tell them nothing. I want to have a band on stage, and in talking to you earlier, it is you and I, and we were singing some classic rock song, because it is at the end of a conference, and any CMO in that audience does not want to hear another thing. They want to just be entertained.
I love it. Best answer of the day, man. Thank you, Jeremy. Good. This has been exceptional, man. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thanks for dropping so many really beautiful mics in this conversation. Like, cool. I can nerd out on this stuff all day, and I really appreciate you. You have seen so many things in the space that you are and leading, and thank you for coming on the show. Please tell Dan and the rest of the team that we send love, and we appreciate you coming back on Marketing Trends.
Thanks so much for having me.